The SEALs thought the night was lost. The mission was collapsing. Air support had been cut, and not a single pilot remained in the valley. Silence pressed heavy against the mountain walls as the captain's voice cracked through the chaos. "Any combat pilots here?" No one moved. No one spoke. And then, without a word, she rose. You're watching the Story Scape, where impossible orders collide with unforgettable courage. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? The operations tent felt smaller than it was. Dozens of men stood shoulder to shoulder, their uniforms streaked with dust and blood. Outside, distant gunfire echoed through the valley. They all knew the truth. If they couldn't get that aircraft off the ground, none of them were leaving. The captain stepped forward. His voice was hoarse but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "Any combat pilots here?" No one moved. Boots shifted against the dirt floor. Eyes dropped to the table covered with maps and radios that no longer worked. Every man in that tent had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. They could fight their way out of an ambush, but they couldn't fly an aircraft without a pilot. Seconds dragged. The weight of the question pressed down on everyone. Some tried not to look at the captain at all. Others exchanged quick glances, as if hoping someone else would rise. What none of them realized was that the answer was already there, waiting in silence. The captain exhaled, his jaw tightening. He was about to ask again when the scrape of a chair sliced through the air. Heads turned at once. At the far end of the tent, half in shadow, a woman rose. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step forward carried a weight none of them could see. The noise in the room died instantly. Her uniform wasn't marked with SEAL insignia. She wasn't part of their tight-knit brotherhood, yet her presence pulled every eye to her. She didn't raise her hand or announce herself. She simply stood tall, shoulders squared, gaze steady. Murmurs rippled across the room. Some men frowned, others whispered in disbelief. The captain's stare locked onto her. "You're telling me you can fly?" She didn't rush to answer. The pause stretched, sharp and uncomfortable. She let it linger until the silence became almost unbearable. Then, with a single, measured nod, she gave her answer. The reaction was immediate. The disbelief didn't vanish, but it cracked. A spark of possibility cut through the tension. After all, no one else had moved. No one else had claimed the impossible. The captain's expression shifted. Suspicion remained in his eyes, but so did a glimmer of hope. He had seen men bluff before, but this didn't feel like that. This was something else, something harder to name. None of them knew the truth of who she really was. If she stepped forward fully, the mission and every life in that tent was about to change forever. The captain didn't look away. His question still hung in the air, heavier than the smoke drifting in from outside. "You can fly?" he repeated, slower this time, as if testing the weight of the words. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't offer a speech, didn't list her qualifications. All she gave was another steady nod. The SEALs erupted in murmurs. "Is this a joke?" someone muttered. "She can't be serious. She's not one of us." The captain raised a hand, and the whispers died down, though doubt still thickened the air. "Then tell me," he said, his tone edged with both suspicion and curiosity. "What makes you think you can handle that bird outside? That's not a toy. That's a machine that can save us or kill us if mishandled."
Her eyes met his, calm, unwavering. "I don't think," she said at last, her voice firm but low. "I know." The words were simple, but they carried weight, enough weight to silence the room again. The SEALs stared at her as if trying to measure the truth inside her tone. One of the younger operators scoffed, shaking his head. "With respect, ma'am, you're asking us to believe you can take a combat aircraft into the air when even half-trained pilots wash out under pressure. Forgive me, but I'm not ready to trust my life to that." She didn't blink. "Then don't trust me," she replied evenly. "Trust the mission, because without that plane, this ends here for all of us." The SEALs wanted proof. What they didn't know was that she had already flown missions none of them would ever read about. The captain studied her closely. He had led men into fire for years, and he knew when someone was bluffing. This wasn't a bluff. Something in her eyes, in the way she carried herself, told him she had stood at the edge before. "What's your name?" he asked finally. For the briefest moment, hesitation flickered across her face. Then, "Call me Raven." The room went still. A few of the older SEALs exchanged puzzled looks as if the name scratched at a memory buried deep. The captain didn't react outwardly, but something in his expression shifted. He recognized the weight of a call sign. Call signs weren't invented, they were earned. "Raven," he repeated. "If I let you near that aircraft, can you get it in the air?" Her answer came without pause. "Yes." "Can you bring it back?" "If I need to." Her confidence wasn't loud, but it was absolute. It cut through the tent sharper than any weapon. The captain exhaled slowly. He wanted to believe. He wanted an option other than watching his men get cut down when the enemy regrouped. But letting her take the controls of a combat aircraft was no small risk.
One of the older SEALs stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, we're running out of time. We can't sit here debating while they surround us. If she says she can do it, maybe we have no choice but to let her try." The captain clenched his fists. He hated that the man was right. Time wasn't on their side. The hangar outside still held their only chance. But if she was lying, or if she failed, every man in that tent would pay the price. Finally, the captain gave a single nod. "All right, Raven, you get one chance. Don't make me regret it." She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She simply inclined her head, as if the decision had been inevitable. The SEALs parted as she walked toward the flap of the tent. Some still glared, others looked uncertain, but none stepped in her way. The storm outside lashed at the canvas, the sound of rain and distant artillery mixing into a grim chorus. As she pushed the flap aside and stepped into the night, the captain turned to his men. "Gear up. If she's telling the truth, we might just have a shot." Outside, the battered silhouette of the aircraft loomed in the darkness, scarred, grounded, but waiting. And now, for the first time that night, someone was walking toward it with purpose. The rain came sideways, carried by winds that clawed at the valley. Floodlights flickered across the airstrip, their beams cutting through the storm in shaky arcs. The aircraft waited like a wounded beast, its fuselage scarred, its paint chipped, its shark-mouthed nose art faded but still menacing. Raven walked straight toward it. The SEALs followed at a distance, their weapons slung but ready, eyes fixed on her as though each step might reveal whether she was truth or illusion. The captain stayed closest. "If you've really flown one of these before, you'll know its condition in seconds," he said, raising his voice over the storm. "I already do," Raven replied without looking back. She circled the aircraft, running her hand along its side, eyes scanning the damage with a precision that no casual observer could fake. Her fingertips paused on the seams, traced the panels, noted the slight bend in a wing strut. "You've flown this model?" the captain pressed. She gave the faintest hint of a nod. And others. Worse than this. A younger SEAL scoffed from the group. "Yeah, you gonna tell us you've seen combat too?" Raven didn't answer. Instead, she crouched beneath the belly of the aircraft, checking the landing gear. Her silence did more damage than any words could have. Doubt began to twist into something else. Uneasy respect. Every movement she made screamed training, discipline, and memory. The kind of memory you don't get from manuals. The kind you only get from surviving.
She climbed onto the wing with practiced ease, boots gripping the slick metal despite the rain. The canopy creaked open under her hand. She paused only once, glancing back at the group of men watching her. "You don't have to believe me," she said. "You only have to watch." With that, she slid into the cockpit. Inside, the world transformed. The storm outside became muffled, the flickering lights reduced to a glow across the rain-streaked canopy. Her hands hovered over the controls, fingers brushing switches, levers, gauges. It was like touching an old instrument she hadn't played in years, yet every note came back instantly. She began the startup sequence: battery, fuel, oxygen flow. One by one, systems sputtered, some reluctantly, some with surprising strength. Through the canopy, the SEALs watched, their disbelief slowly giving way to something else. They didn't understand every movement, but they understood the rhythm. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't fumbling. She was remembering. The captain leaned closer to the cockpit, rain dripping from his helmet. "Tell me the truth, Raven. Who trained you?" Her eyes flicked up at him through the glass. For a moment, he thought she might finally answer. Instead, she flipped another switch, and the whine of auxiliary power filled the air. "That doesn't matter now," she said. "What matters is if this bird still has one flight left in her." The SEALs wanted answers. Raven gave them something else. Results. The first engine coughed violently, sputtering flames before dying down. The SEALs flinched back, muttering curses. Raven didn't react. She adjusted the throttle, tapped a gauge, and tried again. This time, the sound deepened. The engine roared, spitting smoke and fire, before settling into a shaky growl. The ground trembled beneath their boots. "Holy hell!" one of the SEALs whispered. The second engine was worse. Its intake rattled like bones. Raven worked through it with steady hands, coaxing life out of machinery that seemed moments away from collapse. Sweat slicked her forehead despite the cold. Minutes dragged. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, with a defiant roar, the second engine caught. Both turbines now screamed against the storm, the shark mouth seeming to snarl through the night. The captain's disbelief cracked into something sharper: hope. He glanced back at his men. "Get ready. If she pulls this off, we move." Inside the cockpit, Raven breathed once, slow and steady. Her hand settled on the controls like they had never left. The familiar vibration of power coursed through the frame. For the first time in years, she felt at home. The engines were alive, but the true test still waited: the takeoff. With the strip wet, the storm raging, and enemy forces closing in, the question wasn't whether the aircraft could fly. It was whether Raven could make it survive.
The engines thundered so loud, the airstrip itself seemed to quake. Rain hammered the valley,
washing dirt into rivulets that raced across cracked pavement. Lightning flickered against the jagged ridges, revealing the battered aircraft like some ancient beast roused from sleep. It wasn't supposed to fly again. And yet here it was, its turbines screaming back to life under Raven's steady hand. The SEALs formed a half-circle on the strip, weapons slung but eyes fixed on her. Hours ago, they'd been ready to accept death. Now they stood watching a possibility they didn't dare believe in. The captain stepped closer, climbing halfway up the ladder bolted to the fuselage. Rain slid off his helmet in streams. He leaned toward the cockpit. One chance, Raven. If you fail, that's it for all of us. Through the glass, her eyes met his, calm, direct. Then there won't be a second chance, I know. There was no boast in her tone, no need to convince. It was fact, delivered with the weight of someone who had carried worse choices before. The captain held her stare for a moment longer, then gave a short nod and backed down. The canopy lowered with a heavy clunk, sealing her in. For Raven, the chaos outside dimmed to a muffled backdrop. Inside, the cockpit felt familiar. Switches, levers, dials, every one of them spoke a language she hadn't forgotten. Sliding her gloved hands across the controls, she inhaled once, slow and steady. It felt like returning home to a place she'd sworn she'd never see again. For a flicker of a second, a memory hit her. A canyon, radio chatter breaking with static. Her old call sign carried across comms in a voice thick with urgency. She pushed it away. The past didn't matter now. The only thing that mattered was the men waiting for her to make this machine fly. The SEALs thought they were watching a stranger try the impossible. They didn't realize they were watching a veteran return to the only world where she truly belonged. Her voice crackled through the comms, steady. Clear the strip. The captain gave the signal. SEALs rushed to positions along the edge of the runway, rifles raised toward the ridgeline. Beyond the perimeter, muzzle flashes sparked in the darkness, small at first, then more, growing like wildfire. The enemy had heard the engines and understood what it meant. If the jet lifted off, their chance to finish the Americans vanished. The first bullets sliced the rain. Tracers carved orange arcs through the storm. Rounds chewed at the fences and ricocheted across tarmac. "Contact front," a CO shouted. The captain barked orders. "Hold the line. Buy her the time she needs." The air erupted with gunfire. SEAL rifles answered the storm, sharp and controlled, but the enemy pressed harder. Shadows moved along the ridge, slipping closer with each burst.
Inside the cockpit, Raven blocked it out. Her focus narrowed to the glowing instruments and the blurred stretch of runway beyond the rain-streaked canopy. She pushed the throttle, felt the engine strain. The aircraft vibrated like a predator straining against its chains. "Come on," she murmured under her breath, though her voice carried none of the desperation filling the men outside. She released the brakes. The jet lunged forward. Spray exploded off the soaked runway. The SEALs threw themselves aside as the beast roared down the strip, wheels hammering through puddles, engines screaming at full burn. Enemy fire intensified, bullets sparking bright against the wet pavement, rounds cracking dangerously close to the cockpit. The captain stood at the edge of the runway, shouting into the storm, "Go, Raven, go!" Speed built. The end of the strip loomed shorter than ever under sheets of rain. The jet thundered closer, each second an eternity. Raven felt the frame shudder under her, her hands adjusting instinctively, coaxing balance against the crosswinds. The nose lifted. The aircraft wavered, heavy with damage and waterlogged weight. For an instant, it seemed doomed to collapse back onto the runway. Then, the wings bit the storm, and the ground fell away. The seals erupted, their cheers swallowed by turbine thunder. Against rain, gunfire, and odds no one had dared believe in, Raven had taken the sky. For the first time that night, hope roared above the valley. But hope was fragile, and machines didn't forgive weakness. Inside the cockpit, a warning light blinked red across her console. Hydraulic pressure was bleeding fast. Raven's jaw clenched. She'd gotten the jet airborne, but now came the real test. Below, the SEALs regrouped, firing as enemy squads pressed closer. They thought they had just been saved. The captain's gaze tracked the jet climbing into the clouds, his chest heavy with a mix of relief and disbelief. What none of them knew was that Raven was already fighting a silent war inside the cockpit. The plane was in the air, yes, but every gauge screamed that it might not stay there for long. The valley thundered with chaos. Above, Raven forced the battered jet through sheets of rain, its turbines howling in protest. Below, the SEALs fought for every inch of ground, the airstrip lit by muzzle flashes and explosions that turned the storm into a nightmare theater. The cockpit rattled violently as she banked low. Warning lights blinked across the console. Hydraulic pressure dipping, electrical flow unstable, left wing dragging under strain. Any one of those alarms could have ended the flight. Together, they spelled disaster. Raven gritted her teeth, steady hands compensating for the jet's sluggish response. Every movement was muscle memory, years of instinct compressed into calm control. She didn't fight the jet, she coaxed it, kept it alive 1 second longer than it wanted to live. On the ground, the captain shouted orders through the storm. Hold the east flank, they're pushing hard.
Gunfire ripped back and forth. SEALs crouched behind broken barriers, firing measured bursts. An RPG streaked in from the ridge, exploding near the perimeter fence. Shards of metal rained down, but the line held. A young SEAL, helmet cracked from shrapnel, wiped blood from his brow. "Sir, we can't hold this much longer." The captain fired a controlled burst, then glanced skyward. "We just have to hold until she breaks them." The younger man followed his gaze, eyes narrowing at the jet roaring through the clouds. "Who is she?" he muttered. The captain didn't answer, because he didn't know. They all wanted to know who Raven truly was, but right now, survival mattered more than answers. In the cockpit, Raven pulled into a climb, her eyes scanning the ridgeline. Movement. Heat signatures flaring against the dark. She switched to weapons. The systems groaned awake, every light a reminder of damage, but she ignored them. Her thumb pressed the trigger. Rockets streaked into the ridge. Fireballs tore open the night, enemy positions crumbling in thunderous waves. The SEALs on the ground froze for a split second, stunned by the sheer violence of the strike. Then a cheer ripped through the chaos. "She hit them! She actually hit them!" The captain allowed himself the briefest smile. "Looks like we've got an angel overhead." But the fight didn't stop. From the western slope, heavier fire erupted. Artillery boomed, shells tearing geysers of dirt and flame across the runway. SEALs dove into cover as the storm became a storm of steel. "Sir, they've brought up heavy guns," another operator yelled. The captain's stomach tightened. "If she doesn't take them out now, they'll shred us." Raven heard the distant thuds through her headset, saw the explosions rip the airstrip below. She banked hard, pushing the wounded jet toward the western ridge. G-forces pressed her into the seat, the stick sluggish in her grip. Come on, just hold together a little longer. She lined up on the artillery flashes. The jet trembled, controls lagging seconds behind her touch. Her jaw clenched. She fired. Rockets slammed into the ridge, detonating in a chain of fire. The artillery craters collapsed, smoke climbing into the storm. The SEALs erupted again, hope blazing brighter than the flames. For the first time all night, the battlefield shifted in their favor. The impossible was happening. The broken jet, the silent stranger, the SEALs still breathing. But victory was fragile, and the enemy wasn't finished. The ground shook again, this time from the north. Engines, heavy, grinding, relentless. The captain's eyes snapped toward headlights cutting through the rain. Trucks, reinforcements, dozens of them. They're bringing a full company down, he shouted. SEAL rifles opened fire, tracers slicing the night, but the trucks kept coming. Men pouring out, weapons flashing. The line began to bend under sheer numbers.
Inside the cockpit, Raven's console screamed at her. Hydraulics critical, fuel feed unstable, oxygen flow compromised. Every system begged her to quit. She shut them out. She focused on the ridge where the reinforcements spilled down like ants. Her voice cut through the comms. Hold them. I'll clear it. The captain responded instantly. Raven, if you push that bird any harder, it's going to come apart. I'm not asking the jet to last forever, she said evenly. Just long enough. The SEALs below exchanged looks. That calm tone. It wasn't bravado. It was the voice of someone who had flown through worse, someone who had already lived with impossible odds. One operator muttered, "She talks like one of us." The captain shook his head. "No, she talks like more than us." Raven dove again, rain streaking across her canopy. The jet shuddered, alarms screaming, but she forced it into attack position. Rockets hammered the convoy, turning trucks into fireballs, scattering men across mud and flame. The night lit up in chaos. But as she pulled up, a sharp crack shook the aircraft. The right wing groaned, panels tearing loose. Raven fought the stick, her muscles straining. The jet barely responded. Her heart pounded, but her expression stayed calm. "Not yet," she whispered. "You don't quit on me yet." Below, the SEALs cheered as explosions tore the convoy apart. But the captain's sharp eyes caught something else. The wobble in the jet, the smoke trailing from its wing. "Raven, you're breaking apart," he shouted. "I know," she replied, voice steady as ever. She wasn't fighting just the enemy. She was fighting the machine itself, forcing it to hold together by will alone. The SEALs kept firing, cutting down survivors from the convoy. The ridge fell momentarily silent, but silence never lasted in war. From the far edge of the valley, a new sound rose, a mechanical whine, deeper, heavier, a launcher being elevated. The captain's stomach dropped. He knew that sound. "Missile system! They've got a launcher!" The SEALs looked up in dread. If the enemy locked on to Raven's jet, there would be no time to escape. In the cockpit, Raven's radar painted the threat bright, a heavy missile designed to kill exactly what she was flying. Her eyes narrowed, her pulse steady. She whispered to herself, almost too quietly for the mic to catch, "Not tonight." The SEALs braced below, the launcher locked above, and Raven's jet staggered in the storm, damaged, unstable, but ready for one last impossible move. The next 30 seconds would decide everything. The launcher's whine cut through the storm, a sound that froze every man on the airstrip. They had fought through ambushes, artillery, and endless waves of fighters, but nothing terrified soldiers more than that unmistakable pitch of a missile system. "Get down!"
The captain roared, shoving 2 men flat as the launcher fired. A streak of fire ripped into the sky, vanishing in the rain as it chased Raven's jet. Inside the cockpit, alarms shrieked, shrill and relentless. The missile locked onto her heat signature, closing fast. Raven's jaw tightened. The jet wasn't built for this anymore. It was too slow, too wounded. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She yanked the stick, rolling the aircraft hard. The fuselage groaned, metal shrieking against the force. Hydraulic pressure collapsed another notch. Panels rattled loose and tore away into the storm. The missile streaked closer, its warhead hungry for steel. "Raven, evade! Evasive now!" The captain's voice barked through the comms, raw with desperation. "I know what I'm doing," she answered, her tone calm in a way that chilled him more than panic ever could. She dove, engines roaring. The G-force slammed her into the seat. Her breath squeezed from her lungs. Her vision blurred at the edges, sweat stinging her eyes. The jet shuddered like it might tear apart at any second. Rain hammered the canopy in sheets, and below, the SEALs stared helplessly at the predator chasing their only chance at survival. The men thought they were watching the end. Instead, they were about to witness something none of them would forget. Raven dropped to treetop level, the jet's wingtips slicing spray off the soaked foliage. The missile followed, relentless, closing the gap. She cut throttle, forcing the missile to overshoot, but the damaged systems lagged, too sluggish. The missile corrected, screaming back onto her tail. Her mind raced. She couldn't outfly it in this condition, not with hydraulics failing, not with half her control surfaces barely responding. That left her with one option: make the valley itself her weapon. She banked hard toward the canyon wall. The SEALs on the ground gasped as the jet skimmed along the cliffs, so close the wingtips nearly scraped stone. The missile followed, weaving through jagged terrain. "Is she insane?" a SEAL shouted. "No," the captain muttered, eyes locked on the impossible path above. "She's a combat pilot." Inside, her hands worked with surgical precision, every nerve alive with calculation. She threaded the jet through the canyon's knife-edge turns, dragging the missile behind her. Each maneuver wrung another scream from the aircraft, but she held it together, forcing it one more second, one more breath. At the final bend, she pulled up sharply. The jet clawed skyward. The missile, locked too tightly on her heat signature, couldn't follow. It slammed into the canyon wall, detonating in a fiery roar that shook the valley. The shock wave rattled the airstrip. SEALs rose from cover, mouths open as the fireball lit the storm. "She beat it," one whispered. "She actually beat it." The captain exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. Damn right she did. They had thought she was their last chance. Now they realized she was their only chance. But Raven wasn't finished. Her jet screamed as she leveled out, smoke trailing from the right wing. Below, enemy forces still poured across the field, though shaken by the missile's failure. Trucks burned, men scattered, but pockets of resistance fought on. Her hands steadied on the controls. She lined up another run, the shark-mouth nose art grinning through smoke and rain. Weapons armed, rockets fired, the ground lit with fire and thunder. Enemy squads dissolved under the barrage. Those who survived broke and fled into the dark, their wills shattered. The SEALs rose from cover, advancing with renewed fury. One dragged a wounded teammate back while firing bursts single-handed. Another slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, shouting over the storm, "Push them back!" Their courage fed on the roar above. The captain lowered his rifle, eyes fixed skyward. The jet circled once, smoke curling from its battered frame, turbines straining with every rotation. For a moment, he thought it might fall from the sky. But it held. In the cockpit, Raven exhaled slowly. Her muscles trembled, lungs burning, vision still edged with gray from the brutal maneuvers. She let her hands rest on the controls a moment longer, steadying the machine as though willing it to endure. "Airfield secured," the captain's voice crackled through the comms. "You saved us." There was a pause. Then her reply, quiet, almost lost in static. "Don't thank me. Just remember the ones who didn't make it." The captain froze, sensing the weight in her words. She wasn't talking about tonight. She was talking about another war, another mission, ghosts the SEALs would never know. One of the younger men whispered, almost to himself, "She sounds like she's done this before, more than once." The captain didn't answer. His gaze followed the jet as it banked through the storm. Whoever she was, she belonged to skies that none of them could touch. And when he looked again, the jet was already banking away, disappearing into the rain. None of them ever learned the full truth of who Raven really was or why she had been there that night. But they never forgot the moment she rose in silence and shattered their doubt when a lone pilot turned the impossible into survival.